Okay, it says preparing to live stream. Okay, there we go. All right, Zoom is doing its little thing here. Looks good so far.
Technology.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, it looks like I'm going to be open in Facebook, but I should be able to jump back into Zoom if I need to. All right. Ah. Okay. So it looks like we are live in Facebook. So, hey everybody, welcome. And do me a big favor, if you're watching on Facebook or on Zoom, would you just say hi in the chat so I'll know that we're coming through loud and clear and that you can all hear me. So I'm just looking here, let me just open that and that you can all hear me. So I'm just looking here, let me just open that and that you can all hear me. Okay. We have Sarah from Scotland on Facebook. Okay. We have so I'm getting Scotland on Facebook. Okay. So I am going to so I'm getting Scotland on Facebook. There's a little bit of echo.
Yeah. Oh. Hi, Marilyn. I can't hear you. I don't know if you can hear me.
There, that should be better. Tricia, you can hear me now, right? Okay, awesome. All right, so I'm trying to bounce back and forth between Zoom and Facebook, and it's not always working. Oh, so okay, yeah. All right, guys. So, I want to welcome Tricia. She's joining us from the UK, and as a lot of you probably already know, Tricia is the author of this amazing book, Listen to Me. And there's so much in here that I think a lot of us as dog parents and dog lovers that we just completely miss about our dogs, because we're thinking about reacting to our dogs from a human perspective, and we really have to understand what the dogs are feeling and what their body language is telling us about what they're feeling. So if you're on Zoom, pop in the chat, let me know. If you're here, if you're on Facebook and you have a question, let's see. Okay. If you have a question, put it in Facebook. I'm going to jump back and forth and just see if anybody has a Facebook question. If not, you guys can kind of think about what you want to ask, but if not, I've got a couple of things that I want to ask Tricia, and I think that these are some things that maybe a lot of you are wondering about. So first of all, Tricia, in your book, Besides the chapter on showing affection and love and so forth, which we talk about in your summit interview, and we go into a lot of detail there. So I'm not going to go back and repeat any of that, but there's so much more in the book. There are two chapters that I think are really, really relevant to us, especially if we have reactive dogs, because my dog is chiming in, she agrees. Especially, if we have reactive dogs, we need to really be tuned in to what they're telling us about how they feel at any given moment. And just like us, their feelings are going to change. They're not going to feel one way and that's it. Their emotions are going to change depending on what's going on around them. So the two chapters that I'd really like to kind of dive into a little bit are the chapter on play, because it's so important, and the chapter on personal space. So let's talk about play for a minute, Tricia. You mentioned that there are different styles of play. And some people have a style of play that they think the dog should conform to. The dog should agree with that style, but that's not. Sometimes there's a conflict. And I think the one example that stood out for me was the idea of roughhousing with a dog. And there are lots of folks that think that roughhousing is the way to play. You push the dog around, you knock him around, you slap him and all of that. Some dogs like that, but some dogs don't. So can you give me just a little bit of feedback on that whole idea of roughhousing and whether or not it's a good idea, and how we can know for our individual dogs if they like that?
And I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Marilyn. It is absolutely about the individual dog. And I think that means that we need to be looking and saying, is this dog okay with this, or is this dog not okay with that? And it's very easy, we see with dogs playing with each other. Sometimes one dog will find there'll be two playing and they'll both look as if they're playing, but actually one dog is doing a lot of moving off, a lot of turning away, a lot of taking breaks, a lot of always being the buffer, and a lot of doing defensive, not aggressive defensive, but play defensive behaviors. And those are the clues when we're playing, if you're doing roughhousing with your dogs as well, to be on the lookout for. If there's stuff that your dog is saying, I need a break, or I'm not comfortable, or backing off, or, and the very important one is, and we know again with dog to dog, we see exactly the same with dog to dog, if the speed increases, or the vocalization increases, those are our clues that this dog isn't comfortable. And I think that, without any doubt, some of the breeds find that more fun and are more comfortable with doing that. Some dogs aren't so comfortable, but they will still respond, and that's the hard thing for us as people. We kind of feel if they're diving in, if they're coming back, then that's okay. But there are two reasons why it might not be okay, particularly, and I think this also applies to the dogs who enjoy it. So some of the bull type breeds, who do enjoy it, but if they've got concerns or issues with people, if they're concerned about it and get the behavior is OTT, which in my world is over their threshold. If they're over their threshold, when they're meeting other people, not to do with play, but if they're over their threshold when they're meeting, overexcitable, over the top, or if they're concerned or worried, backing off, being over barky, keeping their distance, then roughhousing is not okay for these dogs. And it might be that in a few years' time, when they do feel more comfortable and secure, you might return to that. So I think those are the times that I would say to my clients, no, we need to stop that roughhousing, because what's happening when you're playing like that, the dog is excited, but there's a lot of fear going on as well. And you know, it's like when we played, I don't know what you call it in the States, but we call it hit or tag in the UK.
Yeah.
You know, as kids, when you were playing that game, it's really exciting, but it's also scary. And we don't want that. If you've got a dog that has some sort of difficulty in communicating with you, with strangers, with visitors, with friends, then you need to back off from that. You need to hang back on that. And it's really funny. Well, I think it's really funny because sometimes dogs that are quite worried about people, when they meet a stranger, they go into this play. Should we play? Should we do this chase? And those are often dogs, not often. I think sometimes as those dogs go through that very young stage of play, so that often happens when they're youngish, early teenagery perhaps, but then often later on, those are the dogs that then are much more barky, because although they've been doing that play invite, it's been too arousing. It's had so much fear that's been reinforced and deepened that play, that stranger naturally returns it, don't you? You know, we naturally return it. A stranger will naturally return it, you know, and do that jumping if they're a doggy person. But it's absolutely not helpful. I think a lot of clients who we see who have got issues, the dogs who are struggling with people, they'll tell us that they used to play. They used to invite strangers to play like that. So go easy on that play. They're much nicer way.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that a lot of times when what you just described starts happening, because people don't really understand it and they're not seeing the more subtle cues, body language cues that the dogs are giving off, that there really is that undercurrent of fear or anxiety, because most people don't really know exactly what it means. They think it's cute. And they say, oh, look at that. He's so cute. He wants to play. He's bouncing around and being playful, but they're not seeing beneath the surface. So, you know, your insights, I think, are going to be so helpful to people, especially when they're raising a young puppy and the puppy has behavior that maybe in the back of your mind, you're thinking, well, this isn't really appropriate, but I don't know what to do about it, or I don't know what it should be. So, you know, people just kind of step back and let it happen. But yeah, I guess the bottom line is that if in your gut you feel that something is inappropriate, then you need to ask if it's okay for the dog. And I remember in your chapter on showing affection and love, you said something like, it isn't love if the other one doesn't really want it or enjoy it or doesn't appreciate it. And it isn't love if we don't really acknowledge the feelings of the other person. So I think we can say the same thing about play, that it's not play if the other one isn't feeling confident and happy and really thoroughly enjoying it, and not with that undercurrent of anxiety or confusion about what the appropriate way is. So yeah, I think that's really, really important. I want to ask you about one other thing, because this is something I think that I find when I'm talking to people, that they really don't know that this is something that they can do, and they can do it pretty easily. And that is, how do you just end a play session? How do you let the dog know, okay, we're done now, let's go do something else? And so they just kind of allow the dog to keep escalating that play until it becomes an irritation for them. Maybe the dog keeps bringing that, you know, wet, stinky tennis ball back and putting it in your lap and expecting you to throw it. And you're thinking in your mind, enough already, but you don't really know how to let the dog know that it's enough, without being unpleasant to the dog. So, but there are easy ways to do it. So can we talk a little bit about how to nicely end a play session?
Yeah. And I think I think it's about patterns. And I think we can create the patterns and the understanding for our dogs. We can explain to our dogs in other ways that, that we have a way of saying, we're done now, that's fine, we've finished this bit of game. And so I think play is high, they're very aroused when they're playing, but there's also low arousal play you can do. But if we're talking about this high arousal play, or this typical collie play where they want to play and wants to play, and it's a collie, it's never ever going to not want to play. And I think having patterns, so developing that pattern in things that aren't play. So when you've done your smoothing, your petting, whatever, when you've done your feeding, when you've done your training, having a nice clean way of saying, oh, gone, that's it now, and just being able to disconnect. And it's that very important. We talk about it. Eye contact is so, it's such a massive, it's the biggest way we can communicate with our dogs, that's it, all done now, all gone. Just so if I'm finished playing or I'm finished doing something, I'm just going to, all gone, off you go, and I'm going to break that eye contact. Because dogs don't naturally get it. If you say, off you go, all gone, or no more, if you're still making that eye contact with them, they don't get it. They don't know. I mean, older dogs they do begin to work out that humans are forever looking at them, and it doesn't mean that they necessarily want them to be climbing all over them or playing with them. But particularly our young dogs, they don't get it. And it's strange, isn't it, Marilyn? Because we as humans, if we're looking at each other, making eye contact with each other, we expect there to be some form of communication or some form of interaction. And yet we expect our dogs to be able to cope with us looking at them. And, while we're saying, no, off you go, gone, no more, finish now. But we keep looking. And that's really nonsense in dog speak. It just doesn't make sense that you're saying those words, but you're still asking, you're still giving that contact. So I think that's one very clear way. There are lots of other, being very super aware of your where your eye contact is. I think which activity, so you've been playing, I think then you can go off and do something else. So that's another, all that again is doing is just creating that switch, your body language, your body changes, your invite changes, you're moving elsewhere. So I think that can be very helpful. And I think the other pattern that's really useful is saying, we play in this area. So some of the crazy collies that come to stay with us, we say, okay, we play in the garden, but we never ever play on a walk in the rest of the land, and we never play in our kitchen and living area. The only place we play is this bit of the garden. We don't play anywhere else, because some dogs, that's really helpful. Dogs are really, I don't know, it's not the right word, geographical. They're very spatially.
Yeah.
They've
Location.
got location based,
right.
very patterned with that. And I think we can use that, So with the dogs that are really pesky, just, you need to decide the living room is where I want my space. So therefore, do not play in the living room, play in the hall, play in the kitchen, play in those other places. And I think that, we do have ways of explaining to our dogs without, you don't ever have to say no. You just create patterns in how and where you interact, and when you end it. And it isn't fair, is it? If you're looking at the dog and you're getting annoyed because he's still asking for play, or you, when he drops that foggy tennis ball, as you talked about, on your lap, and you look at that tennis ball, or you go to pick that tennis ball up and move it, wow, your dog's, whoa, here we go. And sometimes we think we're ignoring it, but we're not. If you look at the dog, look at the ball, move your hand towards it, you're not ignoring, not from the dog's perspective, you're not ignoring. And so it's clarity, it's developing clarity.
And we have to be really intentional and really aware of what our bodies are saying to the dog, because body language is their native language. That's how they communicate. So if our body language is not clear to them, or if it's conflicting, we're saying one thing with words, but our body is saying something else, that's very confusing to dogs. So that's great advice. And I love the idea of creating patterns, like now we're going to play in this place, but we're not going to play in that place. And dogs love to have predictable things in their lives, that
Lost
they
you,
like to
Marilyn. You've
know
frozen on me.
what's
I don't know if I've
happening.
frozen on you. I
Yeah.
think you'd better keep talking if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me now? Have I lost you?
I've got you back again. Got you
Oh,
back
good.
again.
Okay, good. Yeah, you know how the internet is. We might freeze for a minute, but hopefully we'll thaw pretty quickly. So I hope. Okay, we do have a question on Facebook, and I'm going to go over there and read it to you. It's from Caro, and she wants to know this. She says, my dog gets loose stools after 15 minutes in any new environment. Although at home, he's really chill. There is some awareness of outside noises, but he lies around calmly. So this is at home. You know, he can hear outside noises, but he's overall calm. Even if I walk him in the countryside on a loose 5mm lead, 5-meter lead, not 5mm, allowing sniffing. Can some dogs get too much sensory information? I feel like I have to limit his world to keep him comfortable. That's really an interesting question. Tricia, what do you think?
I think you're doing amazing by limiting his world. You know, that's he's telling you, providing this doesn't happen in the garden or place where he's relaxed. He's telling you that he's finding things so tricky that it affects his whole body. So absolutely. And I think you can, you know, there are ways to give dogs that novel experience or go places, but we do, you know, you just carry, you're doing amazing. You're listening to what your dog is saying. And I think you absolutely go places. Make sure the car is your dog's safe place. And when I'm working with these dogs that are struggling like this, my going for a walk may not. So I remember probably one of the most severe cases that I was lucky enough to be able to do some rehab work with. And so the dog came and stayed with me. And once we'd made the car a safe place, we would drive somewhere and we would just open the boot. And maybe, and this, you can use this sort of process with puppies as well. I think that's in the chapter with puppies as well. And then you might just let them out, jump out, just wait. I think it's just so important with these dogs that are struggling, and you're great, Cara, that you've heard what he's saying. In our head, we want to go for a walk, but actually what that dog needs is just to feel familiar, that this is familiar. So I think just sitting on the end of the car, letting him get out, if about, give him that option if he needs to jump back in or he feels okay out. Give him that option. Pop him back in. Go do some Facebook posts or go do something or another for a few minutes, 5 minutes. Pop him out again. Leave him, see where does he want to go a little bit further? Go with him a little bit further, but don't keep going. You know, if you've got a dog that's worried, you need to build that up really, really gently, so they've always got that ability to go to you or go to the car. And I think when that worried going back to the car, as using the car as a base is so supportive. So just gradually beginning to let the dog dictate, and then pop him back for a few minutes and then bring him out again for however long he feels comfortable with. I remember the dog, it was a Rhodesian Ridgeback, and she to start with, it was, you know, we did about 3 walks and she never went further than about, probably the maximum was about 2 meters. And by the end of it, she was, give me the world is amazing. But she had been walked with her owners previously, but she looked as if she was sniffing, but she just had her head down and was walking. she couldn't focus on anything enough, and she actually had that same loose stool business. So,
Mhm.
you know, I think, it's it's a huge, massive clue that you're getting there. And just go slow. There's no hurry. You'll walk, give it that time, but don't think of it in terms of distance. You know, just let your dog explore what it feels okay with. And it'll grow. Honestly, if your dog feels safe, if he feels, then his ability to want to go out or to venture a little bit further will grow and grow and grow and grow. You're doing great, Kara.
Yeah. Yeah. Tricia, you mentioned something in that explanation, and I just want to emphasize it because I want to make sure that everybody really hears this. It's so important. Um, you said that the dog has to have the freedom to go back to the car. And
Mm,
that when the dog understands that I can exit this if I feel uncomfortable, I have
mhm,
an exit route and I am free to take it.
mhm,
And that is such a huge relief. If we put it in human terms, if you were in an uncomfortable situation, but you knew you could leave whenever you wanted to, it would give you a sense of freedom and relief. And you might tolerate the unpleasant experience a little bit longer, which is kind of stretching your comfort zone a little bit. But the dog has to be free to choose that on his own. And he has to understand that he can choose to either stay or
yeah,
go.
yeah, yeah,
And whatever he chooses is perfectly
yeah,
fine, and he has his safe place. In this case, if you're out and about, it would be going back to the car. His safe place is always there. He can
yeah,
always go to it whenever he
yeah,
wants to. And I think that's huge. And I'm so glad that was part of your explanation. And I just wanted to really emphasize that for people, because a lot of times we think that we have to micromanage everything. We
yeah,
have to control this and this and this, and we have to make sure the dog follows instructions and so forth. And giving the dogs the freedom to say, yes, I'm okay with this, and no, I'm not okay, and I want to go away. Giving the dog the freedom to do that feels a little uncomfortable for some of us at first. But once you
yeah,
realize the importance of it, then it just kind of fits into the whole thing. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
And
thank you
yeah,
so
and
much.
that, and Marilyn, I think as well, that freedom, sometimes we think if the dog has, if the dog could get away, then that's freedom. If the dog could take us hauling back to the car, then we are giving it the freedom. If the dog could get, or for the dogs that are reactive on, when you're sitting, going back to that home situation, we've talked about that. If the dog could get off the settee, then it has got the freedom. But actually, they haven't. There's a massive emotional component to freedom as well. Freedom isn't just the physical environment. It just isn't just the physical
Oh,
environment. Freedom is
beautiful.
that being able to feel safe. So it doesn't matter if that dog could jump off. If that dog is settled, that dog is emotionally trapped on that chair or in that dog bed. If that dog is in an open field and there are nowhere else for it to go, then that dog is trapped because it has no other option but to keep playing with the dog it feels comfortable with. So I think we need to. Freedom isn't physical freedom. Freedom is about emotional, being able to feel
Oh,
safe, being able to find a way to meet your needs. That's what freedom is about.
yes. Oh, I'm so glad you clarified that.
Mm,
It's the emotional freedom that really
mm,
matters. Physical
mm,
freedom without um, feeling emotionally safe to make that
yeah,
choice
yeah,
really isn't relevant, is it? Because
yeah,
like you
no,
said, if the dog is on the dog bed, but there's nothing physical holding him there, but emotionally he feels that he can't move from that spot, then that's right.
yeah,
He doesn't
yeah,
have freedom.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I
Um,
was watching I was watching well, I had three dogs out today. So it was a new dog who had been with us for a few days and a dog who's come regularly. She's a little bit worried. She's a little bit cautious, a little bit worried. But I know she uses going under in the garden. She uses going under the chairs as a good safety place. Um, so she used the going under the chairs as her emotional. as her physical and emotional safety to get out of the situation. And that gave her some confidence. But what gave her even more confidence was the third dog, who did some splitting up, who did some playing with the other dog, who did some, and that gave her emotional space. It took the pressure off her for a little bit. So within 5 minutes or so, there was really beautiful interactions going on between them, because she felt she would come out and could cope with a little bit more of this other each time, because through the situation, because she could hide, that made her feel physically safe, and because the other dog was also interacting with the potentially more scary dog, that also gave her some emotional time and space as well. And we just need to listen, don't we? We just need to look and
listen, and give them time to process it. So, you know, we get a little impatient, don't we, sometimes, and we want to hurry them along, like, come on, let's do this, but that just makes them even more scared and puts even more pressure on them, and so forth. And, you know, I was sharing this story a few days ago. My dog is a little leery of he's a COVID puppy, so he's a little leery of strangers. And we had to go to the vet's office, and we were sitting in the waiting room, and this very, very nice man wanted to greet my dog. Well, my dog's having none of that. He's not one who's going to welcome any strangers, like, come on, come and pet me. That's not him. But this was a very nice man, but he happened to be very tall, a very, very big, muscular guy. So here's this man, very sweet person, and he's looming over my dog, reaching toward him. And that was just like over the top for the dog. So sometimes we think we're inviting dogs to do something when we're really putting a lot of pressure on them. So we, you know, as you know, the title of your book says it all, Listen to Me, meaning the dog saying, listen to me, please listen to me. I'm talking to you. I have a lot to say, and we need to listen. So yeah, I'm going to check in Facebook right now, see if anyone else. Oh, we do. Okay. We have another question. This one from Sarah. So let me just, okay. So Sarah's question is, my dog is currently on strict pen rest after orthopedic surgery. Yeah, that's hard. That's tough on dogs, isn't it? I try to spend some time in the pen with him. However, I'm mindful that this is a space he cannot get out of. If I feel he signals he would rather be left alone, I remove myself from the area. Is there anything I can do with him to help him relax whilst keeping him still? Good question, Sarah. What do you think, Tricia?
I think that's a super one about using your body language, isn't it? It's I talk about love. You have to listen to what your dog's saying. You have to offer with your body language. So you have to do something that offers some form of interaction. I think for you in this case, it's about keeping it really low level, and you have to value. So this is our listen with your eyes, offer with your body language, and value with your brain. You know, what is my dog doing? What does my dog need in your situation? It's like, what does my dog need? He needs to stay as still, I'm guessing, or not probably not still, but needs to keep the movement very, very, very low impact. And so we have to work that out. We have to think carefully what is going to work, what isn't going to work, which you're obviously doing. And we have to empathize with the fact that that dog does have needs. And I think that you're suggesting that sometimes your dog isn't always comfortable with that all the time. And I think I would be sitting towards the edge of the pen. I think I would be doing little offers, and I would be keeping things very, so, you know, it's soft play I would be doing with your dog. I don't know if it's a little, I would be using that very gentle. So with toys, I would be, I wouldn't be playing. I would just, if my dog's lying down beside, I would just be moving toy this way and that way, and perhaps a little tiny movement with a little bit of speed, so that I'm just getting a little bit of interaction. And if the dog takes hold, I'm just going to gently pull it in. And I don't, if anybody's seen that that beautiful soft play, it always makes me well up. Seeing that beautiful soft play between dogs. And we can do that with our dogs that aren't so great, or that need a lot of rest, or that are poorly, or that are feeling that the outside world is tricky, but this little space is okay. Doing just very, very softly. And it doesn't matter if they don't interact. Sometimes just by taking that toy and playing with it yourself, that's okay as well. Be happy with that. But I think, like you hinted at, and you obviously are doing that, if you think that he sometimes doesn't want to be involved, he's saying that to you. I'm not sure that I want to be involved. And I think just bring your body language down a little bit. And I would be inclined to separate treats and separate your presence. I think we screw it up sometimes by giving the dogs treats for this and treats for that, and then we miss out. We don't. It's that when you're offering treats, they're in a completely the neuroscience of where it's going. I think Carolina Westend is talking about this, isn't she? The neuroscience of where it's all happening in your brain. If treats on go, you won't access play, and you won't access the areas of the brain that are affiliative and social. So be in there. If you want to do your treat time, do a few little treat things, and then you need to put your treats away. Be really clear, move yourself over, but be there. And when your dog comes over and asks for something, off a little bit, and if he moves away, do that. And I think as well, how you touch that sort of dog that isn't quite sure about interactions, avoiding the overhead, avoiding your hands going over the dog, definitely avoiding that patting, which can be quite tricky for dog. You might know before he needed to be confined, restricted, you might already know that he particularly likes under his ears, or he particularly likes under his chin, or he particularly likes under his arms, or he particularly likes his lower back. A lot of dogs love that lower back, or particularly likes telling to touch, massagey stuff. Some dogs really like that massage around their necks. So offer with your body language, value what the dog is saying, and empathize. If your dog says, "Whoa, I need a bit more space, I'm not comfortable," take that on board. Your dog's a bit confused, he's finding it really tricky. Put yourself in your shoes and really get into where he's thinking and where he's coming from, and you adjusting will be easy. I think both of people who have called in, they already are listening to their dogs. And I think I just want to say to you, you're right. You've got it. You do know that your dog is uncomfortable. And sometimes we're not sure. And I think for me, a really great way is, sometimes I've seen the dog do that and I'm thinking, oh, what's going on there? And I used to do this a lot many years ago. And sometimes I'll suggest to clients to do it, is to actually do that with your body. So if that dog is dropped its head and go still, if you drop your head and go still, you will feel something of the emotion that your dog's feeling. If you turn your head away and look away, stilling, you will feel a little bit of what your dog's feeling. Of course, it's not identical. But those basic emotions are very similar. So sometimes just copying what your dog is doing as much as you can see will give you clues as to where your dog might be feeling. And we don't know identically by any manner or means, or with any certainty, but the basis is there.
Yeah, that's great advice. The feelings start in the body, don't they? So it's what your body is doing that tells your brain how to feel. And so getting into that, if you get into a very slouched position, you're going to start to feel emotions that reflect that. But if you stand up tall and take a
Yeah,
breath and put your shoulders back, it's going to
yeah,
change the way you feel. So that's great advice, to do kind of what your dog is doing and
yeah.
see
How it
how
makes
that
you
feels. That really, that
feel.
that is that is absolutely brilliant advice. I love that. It really helps us because it's so hard
Yeah,
sometimes to really know what the dog is feeling,
yeah,
but that's a great insight. That's a great key into it. And
yeah.
also, yeah, I agree with you, Tricia. I think both of these people who ask questions are already doing the right thing. They're doing the best they can. And the fact that they're looking for more help, I think speaks to that they're really already doing just about everything that they can for their dog. So that's great. And a lot of times too, what you just advised, Sarah, is that a lot of times less is more.
Yeah,
It's okay to do less. We think I should be doing more, I should be doing something, but sometimes doing less is really the best choice.
yeah,
So yeah,
totally.
that's
Absolutely.
really
And
great. I'm
even
just
outside, even outside the pen or but even being, even sitting outside the pen and being, allowing the
oh,
dog access, that might give your dog even more, depending on how severe it is, that might be as far as your dog wants to go at the moment. But I think if you start, just look, you already, you're already seeing and you're already listening. Just be, just know you're right. You're doing right. Just look even harder and listen even better.
mm, yeah, yeah, that's true. Okay, I don't see any more questions right now. So let me ask you one of my own, because I have tons of questions. um, and this is kind of related in your chapter on personal space. The previous questions are kind of related to this, but um, this question really has two parts. The first part is, why is it so important to give dogs personal space? And how can we tell in normal circumstances, not if the dog has to be confined because of a medical issue or something like that, but in normal everyday situations, how can we tell when the dog says, you're in my space, I need more space? And do they have a right to say that? Trick
Well,
question, right?
well, do they have a right to say that? If you want to have a trusting relationship with your dog, you'd better listen,
Yeah.
because your dog can't trust you, can he, if you don't listen? And that can be, like we talk about during our Q&A, that can be that it's related specifically to specific situations. But we
Mm,
don't want to be doing anything to erode our dog's trust in us. We want to be as clear as we can and as empathic as we can. That's why you've got a dog. That's what all of us want. We want that relationship. So it is absolutely about listening. And I think there's, we've talked a little about it. I think one of the major things to be doing is watching for any movement away, be that eyes turning away, be that
mhm,
face turning away, be that head turning away, be that shoulders turning away. Watch out for any little, no matter how subtle it is, watch out for that. And we get the same with the ears, don't we? That ear going in that direction and the ear listening out in that direction. Watch all those clues that tell you your dog is not
mm,
fully with you.
mhm.
And listen. It's absolutely okay to listen, because the more you can meet your dog's needs, the more you can make your dog feel safe,
Mhm.
the more he's going to grow and the more your relationship is going to grow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what we're all after, isn't it? We're after that
Right.
that that relationship, and being, you know, I think there's so much we can do to prepare dogs for knowing that stuff is going to happen. You know, I think Kim Brophy calls that, well, you Americans know that Mr. Rogers pack, you know, that chatting, then give them that information. Hey, I'm coming over and I'm going to sit down here, or when they're asleep and said, oh, I'm going to get up now. And before you get up, with a dog that's concerned or jumps up suddenly, or a dog that reacts, just giving them a little bit of warning and a little bit of time to process. You know, well, I think we say it so much now, but well before some of your listeners' time, when phones used to hang on the wall, or be attached to a wire, and the phone would ring, everyone would jump up and go. And we at that time, we used to see quite a lot of dogs who struggled with that telephone noise. Now I think we get it with doorbells, or you know, that sudden change of dynamic that is really hard. And I think being aware of your whole energy create lots of gives lots of information to your dog as to what sort of space they need. So again, it's about hearing that out, isn't it? And you know, I think that the space in the big way as well, that we talk about it again, I've talked about it in the book, that sometimes we think, I wasn't going towards the dog. Sometimes people would say to us, I wasn't going there, I wasn't going past the dog. Or somebody said to me only the other day, they didn't they thought the dog was reacting, and they were convinced it was out of the blue. They'd already seen worked with another behaviour, and the gentleman was absolutely convinced that this dog attacked him and had bitten him, and he was convinced that this was out of the blue. That it was a veterinary behaviour he'd seen. So I wasn't seeing her behaviour, but I'm having the dog in to home board, so I needed to understand what is going on here. And although he was convinced it was out of the blue, when I asked, if you're turned away or you're not interacting with the dog, does it happen then? No. Has it ever happened when you haven't been interacting or going towards the dog? No. So this isn't out of the blue. You know, it's not out of the blue. So has it ever happened when you haven't been looking at the dog? No. So from the dog's perspective, it was, he felt it was out of the blue, but it wasn't. We're back on our eye contact again. His looking at the dog was sufficiently threatening. And that can be that the dog is 30 feet away. We know with dogs that react with other dogs, it can be 20 feet away. You know, if that other dog has got his head down and is looking, or your dog has got his head down and is looking, you know, there's this locking going on. And I think we just need to be so aware that the dogs, it's not the physical space. Oh my gosh, we're back on it again. It's the emotional space. And if that dog perceives that you're threatening, it doesn't matter how far away you are. If he perceives that you might be approaching, and it might be threatening, because in the past there's been something that worried him, he perceived as threatening. The space, the distance is far, far, far less relevant than how that dog feels and how you're creating or not creating, or, you know, telling the dog that no, you're not getting into this space. And you know, it's really bizarre, that, isn't it? So I know when, and lots of people and groomers will know this, and vets will know this, if you need to examine a dog or need to do something to a dog that it's uncomfortable about, the more you can do that without actually looking at the dog, the better. And hey, we've all got mobile phones now, haven't we? So I had a vet's dog, who a rather gorgeous staffy type handsome dog lady. We've had her for ages. I'm sure they won't mind me saying. And she had badly broken one of her nails off while she was with us. The dog was very reactive, and I wasn't going to touch it. But I knew we needed to assess the situation. So I could go over, I knew I could go over and rub her. So I can rub her, so I can get within that sort of space that she's comfortable with. I couldn't have touched her legs, but my camera can go down and take lots of information, lots of photographs, lots of video as to the foot from all different directions. So I can get that information to the owners who would be in a position to be able to act on that. And so there's space, but there's emotional space. So even though I was close, it wasn't a threat because I was doing things that the dog felt comfortable with. And I could do that tricky stuff by using a camera. So it's not just the physical space, is it? It's the emotional, it's where the dog feels comfortable. That's
you can invade their space by just looking, with our eyes. And we sometimes forget that. And you're making me think again about that situation at the vet's office with my dog, that the man wasn't really standing that close to us, but he was looking at my dog. And the dog must have sensed that this person was looking at him, because he intentionally looked, and then his ears went back, all the signs. His ears went back on his head, his eyes got big, and he started to make a little rumble in his throat. And I really wanted to say to the man, stop looking at my dog. But all I said was, he was reaching toward him too. But a hand, that would make it worse. And then I looked away from him, hoping that he would take that as a signal to look away. I don't know if he did or not, because I wasn't looking at him. But yeah, I mean, that's just a kind of an example of how we can really get into a dog's space without being physically right there. And I just want to go back for a second, because I want to make sure that that people, the Mr. Rogers hack, they may not know it's a creation of Kim Brophy, who's also one of our speakers, and referring to this TV show, goes back decades and decades now. The character was Mr. Rogers, and he would just, it was for children, and he would chat, he would just kind of narrate what was going on and just talk in this very calm, soothing, natural way, and children would be literally mesmerized listening to him. And if they were excited, they would just calm down because of the very smooth and easy way he was talking. So, we recommend that to folks who have dogs that are easily distressed. And I actually had a client, I really need to share this. Her name was also Tricia, or Trish. And she had a dog that absolutely went into total freeze mode whenever he had to go to the vet. And he was a big dog, so it was kind of hard to manage, but he absolutely totally froze. So what she started to do was explain to him what was going on. So she would talk to him on the way to the vet, in the car, going into the office, in the waiting room. She would say now, and there was one time he had to go back for an x-ray, so she couldn't go with him. But she told him everything that was going to happen. She described it. She said, I'm not going to go with you, but I'll be right here when you're done. And these nice people, on and on, explained everything. So when they were finished with the procedure, they brought the dog back to her, and she said, was he okay? Did he get really upset? And they said, no, he was really totally relaxed. We were surprised that he was so relaxed because, for an x-ray, they have to, be kind of still. And they didn't want to sedate him for the x-ray. So I just thought that was such a telling example of how, we all have the ability to calm our dogs down by just using our just normal human skills of chatting calmly the way we would chat to a child. So I just thought I would share that.
And it's a lot, I think sometimes people think that they don't understand words. So what's the point of
Yeah,
chatting? And it isn't anything to do with the words. You could talk gobbledygook, you could talk
right.
clingers or whatever. It isn't what you're saying, it's your tone, and you feel better because you're chatting, which is a help. I have to tell you that I'm not a very chatty person to my dogs, but I use scent an awful lot to explain things to them. But I do absolutely see that, and see that where absolutely see that, particularly for people who are worried, being able to chat their dogs through things, give them that information. It's not that you're giving the dogs information about what's happening, you're giving the dog information about, this is how I feel, and
Mhm.
therefore it's okay.
Yeah.
And that's what's so magical about that,
So I
narrating,
think
narrating.
that's a really good distinction. I'm glad you brought that up, because
Mm,
the fact that she was describing what was going to happen wasn't so much that she was telling the dog, preparing him. By describing it that way, her voice sounded very calm and matter of fact, and it was the thoughts and the intentions behind those words that conveyed to the dog that calm, comforting, soothing energy, like, this is going to be okay, this is going to be fine, here's what's going to happen, and so on. And I also think it's important that we keep in mind that we're not telling the dogs how they should feel.
yeah,
So she wasn't telling the dog,
yeah,
don't be scared, don't blah, blah, blah. She was just saying, here's what's going to happen, and
yeah,
nobody's going to hurt you, and it's going to be good, and these people are going to do this, this, and this. So it was just that Mr. Rogers hack. Again, maybe the children listening to Mr. Rogers way back all those decades ago, they may not have understood everything he was saying, because some of them were just like little babies. But it was the way he said it, and his voice was so soothing and so calm that they picked up on that emotion. We can do the same thing
yeah.
for our dogs.
And I think that's about. I feel that's also about us. Our temptation is, and the more lovely you are, the more you get your dog, the more you see that your dog is scared and freezes and isn't very comfortable, and the more we're inclined, and this is, I love these clients, the more you're inclined to go down to your dog, it's okay, it's all right, it's all right, and we get into that reassuring mode. And then while we absolutely need to be there, but it's much more helpful to bring them up to your emotional state, and you can not control, you can moderate your emotional state by doing that narration, by talking a load of nonsense. Oh, we're going in and he'll do this, and then we're going to do that, and then this will happen, and then that, and da da da. And that, us doing that narration, keeps us emotionally in this sort of level, even though your dog is feeling down here. And I think really, my beautiful, beautiful clients who understand the dog, we don't want them to go down there. We want them to stay up there and just let the dog come up to them. And we all feel nervous at the vets. Well, I think most pet owners, most dog guardians do. They have that. They feel as nervous, and it's also very helpful for you.
Yeah. There's a comment on Facebook from Maggie, and she says, I'm working really hard at helping my dog to overcome his anxiety around other dogs. I have to say, his behavior has made me really anxious myself. Yeah, that happens, right? Today, I spoke to him when a dog was coming towards us, chatting as if we knew them. I have to say, it really helped both of us. No reaction at
Mhm,
all. He just sat, watched, and processed before disengaging. Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah. So you must have, Maggie, whatever you said was, I think the way you said it was really the
yeah.
most important thing, right, Tricia?
Yeah, absolutely. And and it's only effective if the dog, it's not effective if the situation is too extreme for that particular dog, because they're
Mhm.
not even processing, they're not even hearing you. So,
Right.
it's only effective, and obviously that person wasn't putting the dog in too difficult a situation. It was in a situation that the dog was, why I would say it's absolutely on threshold. He could manage, given the space, given the security that mum feels okay about it. He actually could deal with it and could manage it. And oh, you think it's okay, do you? Well, maybe it's not so bad after all. You're saying it's okay. And I think that's, I think it is, isn't it? It's about tuning in
Yeah.
and
And once,
knowing what is gonna support your dog.
right. And once they're over threshold, of course, then you need to have a completely different process. You need to just get them out of that situation as quickly as you can so that, it doesn't get worse. That is the time to chat them through it. Only if they're already on the verge of trying to decide if they need to get excited or not, and then you can talk them down if you do it in the right time. Carol has one more question. And it's a follow-up, Tricia. You mentioned when it's not a good time to use treats. So her question is, can you expand on when it's better not to use treats versus when treats can help?
Whoa, there's a whole chat, isn't it? I, I think it, I think you have to remember that if you're using treat, the dog is going to be interested in the treat, presuming it is interested in the treats, otherwise you wouldn't be choosing to use treats. So if the dog is interested in the treat, it's going to be trying to do things to get you to produce those treats. So as long as that's the relationship that's going on, then your dog is not in the same space as it will be when you're not using treats. So I would never, if I had a treat on me, I would never expect a dog to just come and relax down beside me and put its chin on my lap. Thinking back to your situation, if I was using treats, I would never expect a dog that was interested in treats. I would never expect that dog to comfortably be able to say, oh, that's a bit much, because the treats are going to drive the dog into wanting the treat or wanting to do something to get the treat. So if you want to find out and help and support your dog in trust and in feeling safe, and if you want to build that relationship that's not to do with teaching the dog behaviors or training, then you need to forget your treats. Your treats are giving you a completely different picture, and we see this with the reactive dogs. How often, I'm sure you see it as well, every professional who's listening on here, and people who come to us and they have used treats to get the dog to make friends with somebody. And does the dog make friends? No, because emotionally they're offering the treat over here. The dog wants the treat, but the dog isn't saying, oh, hi, this is nice, I'm going to get the treat. The dog is saying, oh my gosh, I want that treat, but emotionally I'm back there. The dog isn't there with that treat, the dog is back there. So when you've got treats, it completely confounds the whole picture. So if you want to find out how your dog is feeling, you need not to have your treat on you. If you've got treats on you, you will see the extreme of how your dog is feeling. And you need to look extremely closely at the body language that your dog is using, because those treats trigger a different area in the brain. You're going into the seeking areas of the brain where the dog is working, wanting to do that, to interact. Whereas actually, I think, Caroline, what you were talking about is having some contact time and some relaxed communication time, and therefore that needs to be a separate time altogether. That worked quite well. Just go in and be there, and then you can really take on the body language is going, and really take on the communication. The treats are amazing for helping and showing our dogs what to do. But I think Steffi Guy's talking on this, isn't she? How
A little bit, yeah. Steffi's talk is about counter conditioning and how it can sometimes work against us. So, yeah, and counter conditioning is a system where treats are often used to create a different emotional response to something. But you have to, I think what you're saying is important, that when you're using food, you need to be really, really aware of the effect that the presence of food is having on the dog. Dogs that are highly stressed and have gone over threshold and are already in their fight or flight brain are probably not going to be interested in food, because their brain is putting them in survival mode, and they're too stressed. I mean, we don't feel like eating if we're really upset and worried most of the time. So, I think that's a good point. I think you have to be really, really careful about that. So let me see. So Sarah says, how do you do? Oh, this is a good question. How do you deal with the feeling of guilt when your dog has ended up over threshold, regardless of how hard you try to avoid it?
That's a really hard one, Sarah. And I think, life happens, and you just have to say, hey, that happened. Let's start again. But I do think there are other ways you can mitigate it a little bit. I think if you've done so, I won't let, when I'm working with dog to dog cases, I won't do any dog passing or any dog work until I know the dog understands how to sniff and explore and is interested and has got lots of feedback, and so has got into and wants again, because often dogs have dog issues with other dogs, struggle to be comfortable enough to sniff, like we see, taste, sniff, it's all in the very similar part of the brain. They're making sure those dogs know how to sniff so that you can direct them on that. And sometimes I would use treats to scatter to get them going with their noses, so that they're beginning to take that scent in. So you getting them to use their nose can often help you get out of a tricky situation. I also use treat games where I've again previously took the dog, when they're really comfortable, fast throwings of treats for that situation that has gone the wrong way, it's been a complete disaster, and I want my dog to forget it as quickly as possible. I don't want to spend the next 5 minutes on the walk thinking what and where I want, just to switch him. And I wouldn't use treats in the grass as a scatter to find, and I wouldn't use the treat game when things those are my emergency strategies. So using that fast game, that fast something happening, can help the dog switch in an emergency when things go really wrong. But we always have to be saying, hey, do we really need to put our dogs in those situations if it sometimes is going the wrong way? Because what happens very often is you go forward, and then crash, and then you're back 3 steps, and you go forward, and then you're back 2 steps, and so it really does delay you. Who is it? Nikki French, isn't it? Isn't she doing the talk on don't walk, you don't have to walk your dog? Oh my gosh, you must listen to that, Sarah. Because our dogs, it's in our head that they have to go for walks, and we have in our head what a walk looks like, but that doesn't have to be the way for your dog. And I think if you listen to Nikki French's talk, that will release you, and it'll give you huge comfort and huge hope.
Yes.
So I think hold on to that. And I think if you're already working with somebody and you've already got a program going, and it's very occasionally, once every 15 walks or something, that this accident has happened, I think you need to be keeping a record of, oh, I passed 6 dogs today and we did really well. And the day before I passed 10 dogs, and the day before that I passed 3 dogs. So you need to keep hold of it yourself, but actually your dog's doing quite well. And one of the most useful ways of gauging progress is how quickly that dog recovers. And that's magic when you start seeing how quickly your dog can recover from a tricky situation. So I've the two strategies I've talked about are inducing recovery, reducing a switch rather than recovery, reducing a switch to aid recovery. But you know, I think that's one of the loveliest things, as we're known as say, we passed a dog the other day and it all went awful, but then he just got down and he started sniffing and we just carried on. And this was the dog that when they came was that dog twice that distance was looking back and keeping an eye on or barking when they left or when they went away. And might take 2-3 minutes before it resettled. So that recovery, that time after a little bit of a mishap, is really useful information. And it's really, really exciting when that recovery kicks up, when you begin to see that recovery into place. But real disasters, you need to just, as Marilyn, as you said, Marilyn, a real disaster, you just need to get out of there. Your priority is to get out of there, create a safe space for your dog.
Yeah, but it's so easy to feel guilty when you think, oh, I should have done, something different. But I think we have to forgive ourselves and we have to give ourselves a little grace. We're doing the best we can. And we're always looking for ways to learn more, to be better, to be kinder, to be more empathetic and more compassionate for our dogs. Nobody's perfect. And the good news, I think, is that dogs are very forgiving. If you already have that trusting, loving relationship and you screw up, they're very forgiving. So, and I can tell you that because I've screwed up plenty of times.
Yeah, we all have, absolutely.
Yeah, we all do, right?
Yeah,
and we just need to say, okay, live and learn. Feedback, we're going to move on. But I don't want to subject my dog to my, pity party either, because he's not going to understand what's going on if I do that. So,
And I think maybe the other thing that's worth noting when things do go badly wrong, it is very tempting with us as humans to go heavy. Our body language changes, and because we're annoyed with ourselves, we're angry with ourselves, and your dog doesn't get that you're angry with yourself, because dogs don't think in quite that way. We don't think. So your dog quickly interprets your annoyance with yourself, your disappointment, your annoyance, your frustration with yourself. Your dog picks that up. So be super careful when accidents do happen. Be super careful that you, Mr. Rogers, chat about, oh, look at that tree over there. I wish that person was that tree who let their dog come that close to me. And, I think just switch into chat. You need to take your head out of that particular space. Think that through when you get home. Don't be thinking it through when your dog is with you at that particular time. And because your body language is going to be giving your dog, whoa, this was a tricky experience. Your heart is, everything about you is going to be giving your dog that it's tricky. But the least you can alter your body language and use your chit chat to emotionally take yourself to a different place, which will change your body language, which would change how your dog perceives the situation. So, I think at the time there are several things you can use, and then when you're home, you need to use your brain, value what was good in that situation, value the extra information. It's information you've got, and hey, let's go forward. It's a very big thing for me. People very often, when they realize that actually their dog wasn't being naughty, their dog just had a need that wasn't being met, or that their dog wasn't being angry with them, or their dog wasn't being jealous, or people often experience that guilt and that often, but it's, I so hugely believe, hey, that's yesterday, let's go from today, because this is where we are at this moment in time. This is where we are. That's okay. we can learn from that. Now let's go forward. And I think sometimes we have to hold on to that very tightly.
Great advice.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's great advice. A little self-awareness, a little self-forgiveness, and move on from here. And don't worry about what's in the past. Yeah, I love that. So we're going to end it in this live stream, although we could probably go on for another hour, I'm sure. I want to thank everyone who attended, everyone who commented and asked questions. If there's anything else that you need, I'm sure that if you go in and tag Tricia in a comment, she'll see it, and and she'll continue to help you out. So thank you, everyone, and